We're going to get to all these headlines and more this morning, but first, here's our question for you as students around the country head back to the classroom. Should schools be required to teach patriotism? Donald Trump has suggested that they should. Let us know what you think. Here are the lines to call. Democrats, your number is 202-748-8000. Republicans, your number is 202-748-8001. Independents, the line is 202-748-8002. You can also share your thoughts with us on social media. We're on Twitter, and our handle is @CSPANWJ, and we're on Facebook at facebook.com/CSPAN. Now, Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump brought up the issue of patriotism in our public schools during a speech earlier this week to the American Legion. Here's a little bit of what he had to say.
Together, we're going to work on so many shared goals. But I want to begin by discussing one goal that I know is so important to you: promoting American pride and patriotism in America's schools. Very important. In a Trump administration, I plan to work directly with the American Legion to uphold our common values and to help ensure they are taught to America's children. We want our kids to learn the incredible achievement of America's history, its institutions, and its heroes.
A recent Gallup poll found that a new low of 52% of Americans say they're extremely proud to be a part of this country. Now, that low is down from a high of near 70% after the terrorist attacks of September 2011. You can see that the peak was in 2003. And you can see that now 52% of Americans say that they are extremely proud to be Americans, and that decline is being led by young adults in particular. The number of young adults who say that they are extremely proud to be Americans has fallen by 26 percentage points since 2003, compared to the number of people who are older than 65 who say they are proud to be Americans. That number has declined only by 13 percentage points since 2003. So you can see the decline there being led by young adults in terms of the number of people who say they are extremely proud to be Americans. Now, does that mean that our schools should be teaching patriotism? Let's bring in a reporter for the Military Times. Andrew Tillman is joining us now on the phone lines. Good morning, Andrew. Andrew, are you there?
Yes, good morning.
Good morning, Andrew. So tell us a little bit about what Donald Trump has said about teaching patriotism in public schools. What was his message to the American Legion?
Well, I hadn't heard Donald Trump talk about this before, and clearly he was targeting this particular audience to some degree, but he also spoke with what for him sounded like a little bit of specificity in terms of specifically teaching American children about the institutions and heroes that and generally conveying a sense of patriotism, and I think that he was touching on an issue that's become a little bit more controversial, particularly in among conservative circles these days. The idea that somehow curriculums should be altered to downplay certain negative aspects of American history and promote more positive ones.
Andrew Tillman, what role does the federal government have, if any, in suggesting or outlining the type of curricula that schools should be teaching?
Well, traditionally they've had almost none, and in fact, it's my understanding that the laws that created the Department of Education back in, I believe, 1979, specifically said that the Department of Education would provide support and funding and training, but that they were not going to get involved in the management of curriculum and procedures and programs in the public schools. Now, the current Common Core curriculum, does try to set some standards, and in setting standards, they do have some tests that ask, questions, and that can affect the way that teachers teach. But the law is pretty explicit that the federal government, should not be handing down specific guidelines for school curriculum.
And is there any sense that if patriotism were to become a bigger part of our public school curriculum, what that would look like? How would we even begin to teach patriotism?
Well, I think that's a really good question, and that's the underlying question. I think a lot of people would disagree about what precisely that means to teach patriotism. I think that there have been in particular, there have been some controversies over the AP U.S. history class that's taught to seniors. I think in the state of Oklahoma, there was a little bit of discussion about this at the State House, and I think there was a big school board election in the Denver area about this. And basically, I think what the critics say is that there's too much emphasis on, the slave holding of the founding fathers and the treatment of the Native Americans by the colonialists, and maybe how the civil rights movement is portrayed in history books. I think those are really some of the places where people really disagree about what's where you cross the line from historical accuracy to negativity or patriotism.
And Andrew, do you have any sense of how this issue might resonate on the campaign trail?
I don't really. I believe this was the first time. It was the first time I had heard Donald Trump speak about this, and I did a little bit of research and couldn't find him speaking about this really before. So I don't know how it'll resonate. I did get a little bit of feedback from the story I wrote that some people thought this was a great idea. I suspect, like a lot of things that he's been saying, it will really resonate with his core group of supporters and will probably be kind of off-putting to the people that don't support him.
Andrew Tillman is the Pentagon reporter at the Military Times. Thank you so much for taking some time to join us early this morning.
Sure, thank you.
Our question to you this morning is, should schools be required to teach patriotism? Again, this is something that Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump has mentioned on the campaign trail. Here's a little bit more from Andrew Tillman's story in the Military Times. He said that in 2014, the Republican National Committee passed a resolution that denounced the curriculum of advanced placement U.S. history courses, claiming that it reflects a radically revisionist view of American history that emphasizes negative aspects of our nation's history while omitting or minimizing positive aspects. The story goes on to say that public schools nationwide are funded by their local communities, along with some state money. Most schools receive little federal funding. Current federal law prohibits the federal government from exercising, quote, any direction, supervision, or control over the curriculum, program of instruction, administration, or personnel of any educational institution, school, or school system. Let's turn now to the phone lines. You can call us and share your thoughts. Democrats, your number is 202-748-8000. Republicans, the line for you is 202-748-8001. Independents, your number is 202-748-8002. Our first caller this morning will be Delma from Delaware, Ohio. And Delma, what do you think?
Good morning.
Good morning.
My first belief is, as a teacher of many years, it first starts with in the home. And when parents realize and teach just basic patriotism, you stand when you hear or see the flag going by in a parade. That kind of thing starts patriotism. In the school system, that, to me, that goes without saying. Anything more. Being in a public school system, you need to have a sense of belonging to your country. I mean, how else can we teach our children?
And Delma, as an educator, how would you teach that sense of patriotism, that sense of belonging to your students?
We have to go back to me, is the history, for example, in Ohio or in West Virginia, where I taught a while also. Go back to the history of the state. If nothing, if you have nothing else to fall back on, find out how did it become a state? How were the people involved? How did they become so united that they wanted to become a state? How was our United States united? It's a problem, I know, and people are afraid. Well, you can't hurt someone's feelings. It's not a matter of. I don't think any teacher would hurt someone's feelings by saying, we are a United States of America.
All right, that's Delma from Ohio. Next up is Bernard from Ogden, Utah, calling on the Democratic line. Good morning to you, Bernard.
Hello there.
Good morning.
In response to the question, no. They should not be requiring patriotism. We need to have, as the reporter from the Military Times stated, how can I say this? There is, I'm trying to have, my thoughts here. Well, we need to have, the true history of the United States, being taught, even the good and the bad. And if you teach only the patriotism part, you'll leave out the, how we treated the American Indians, such as how many people know about what happened in 1890 at Wounded Knee, or some of the what happened, how the slaves were treated in Mississippi. If like the Confessions of Nat Turner book was accurate, that's what needs to be taught, so they get a true history of the United States, not a skewed history.
All right. That's Bernard from Ogden, Utah on the Democratic line. Let's turn now to San Clemente, California. Ron is up early and calling on the Republican line. Good morning to you, Ron.
Hey, thank you, Jan. Listen, when I grew up, you put your hand over your heart. We saw flag raising in the morning, and we pledged allegiance to the country. We did a lot of things that included reading about Johnny Tremaine and the Founding Fathers and all that sort of thing. But that was at a time after World War II when the propaganda stream was on all sides. In every country in the whole world, there was a propaganda about why they were right. The French had their way, the Russians had their way, and the United States had our way. We were diving under desk in the 50s because of the threat of nuclear war. If you'll think back real quickly, the Founding Fathers, at the time of the Founding Fathers, there were 13 colonies, 2.6 million people in the whole of the United States. Today, there's 320 million, and we live in a global society. It's a whole different type of look at the thing. There's no doubt in my mind that my famous hero, John Paul Jones, was really never written about properly back in those days. Today, he's still my great hero, and there's so many good heroes in the United States. But you have to study history, and the history that they write in each one of the schools is totally different, and it's completely wrong. And they don't talk about Andrew Jackson and his Trail of Tears, taking the Indians out of Florida and the southeast. There's a variety of different issues that are not history is complex. Let's put it that way.
All right. Ron from San Clemente, California. Turning now to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Charles is on the independent line. Charles, good morning.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, you hear me?
We hear you. You're on the air, Charles.
Yes. U.S., United States, is us, all of us. And I think that the Pledge of Allegiance and the Bill of Rights and should be known by everyone, and they should be able to say that. And I think we should eliminate the / American. You're either American first, and you're some other country that you're from is your heritage. and we have too much of this African American and English American and Dutch American. We should eliminate the slash.
All right, that's Charles from Florida. Next up is Joe from Grand Ledge, Michigan, calling on the independent line. Joe, good morning.
Hey, good morning. Hey, I was an educator for 11 years. I taught government and social studies, and I'm now an administrator in public schools. And, I always felt teaching patriotism was very close to teaching racism. I think what I'd love to see as a curriculum is Howard Zinn's People's History of America introduced into the curriculum and teach, like I think the last few callers, teach the true history. And I think right now the dangerous part of patriotism is nationalism.
So Joe, why is patriotism like teaching racism in your view?
Because it's intolerant. It teaches you to be intolerant of anything else. And that's kind of what we've done. And really, I think our U.S. history in this country right now is almost a mythology. It's myth. It could be put into the literature, language arts department as fiction.
And Joe, in your school, do you all say the Pledge of Allegiance, or is there any type of, acknowledgement of the flag on a daily or regular basis?
Yeah, our governor, Rick Snyder, and our Republican Congress passed that. It didn't change. It doesn't change anything. It's just another thing the kids do. And in my school district, half our kids are free and reduced lunch. Half our kids, when you talk about patriotism and you talk about those things, they live on the other side of being marginalized from a system. And I think that's where it's a false pretense. It's a false thing taught to kids. Patriot and committed to what? I mean, they see their parents lose jobs. They see their parents lose houses. I mean, they saw what happened in '08. Where was the patriotism then?
All right, that's Joe from Michigan calling on the independent line. Here's a story out of Tallahassee, Florida. Florida man's Facebook post about a school's Pledge of Allegiance waiver is getting a lot of attention. Micah Brennan's niece goes to an elementary school in Tallahassee, which is part of the Leon County School District. Brennan took to Facebook recently after his niece came home with the Pledge of Allegiance opt-out waiver form. In his original post, Brennan wrote, "My niece brought this home from school today. What is happening to our country?" He followed up with another Facebook post explaining that the waiver is part of the Leon County Student Handbook and parents are required to sign it and return it to confirm that they received it. Quote, he said, "I believe it's another step in the progressive political movement to destroy the education system. We have a lot of American values and traditions that seem to be withering away." And you can see there a copy of the note itself on Micah Brennan's Facebook page. Let's turn now to Chugiak. I think it's Chugiak, Alaska. Diana's calling on the independent line. Diane, there you are. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay, great. What's your thought this morning?
Yeah, I'm in my 70s. I was born and raised in Alaska, and I was shocked at your question for the day because I didn't think we weren't teaching patriotism. I grew up with it being taught. You really learned it. You had an educator on earlier who said you start in the home when you go to the 4th of July parade and you put your hand over your heart when the flag passes and you talk about things on Memorial Day and Veterans Day and you participate in those things. And, of course, you're taught in school the history and the founding fathers, and per grade level you go up learning more and more, and of course the importance of the values and the uniqueness of America and its values and standards, and what is American exceptionalism, which is not meant to say that we are better than anybody else in the world. That's not what exceptionalism means. It means the way we were founded, the values and the freedoms that we have that are unique and exemplary for other countries around the world, and which is why people flock to America. I just as a quick aside, I grew up, because I grew up in Alaska, heavily involved with the military up here. We had to put tar paper over our windows or turn all the lights off during raids, and we had times when we had what was called red alerts, where that meant enemy planes were overhead. And so I grew up with a very real sense about war, whereas people in the lower 48, they may have ducked underneath their desks, but it wasn't quite the same as really feeling and believing and knowing that a bomb could drop on you.
Well,
Diane,
Diane, let me ask you this question: Is teaching history enough to teach patriotism to our students? Is that sufficient to ensure that students learn to become patriotic Americans?
Again, it starts in the home, and if you're an immigrant or someone who's from a different society, hopefully you've come here with an appreciation of some kind, on some level, of America for the opportunity you have, or the experience you're going to have, or the things you're going to learn while you're here. And so you learn something about the nation and its values that you're enjoying here that you may not enjoy someplace else. But it should start in the home. It should continue in the schools, and it should you should be taught awareness. You should be taught to look for it. For instance, when you see all the flags go out after 9/11, every home practically had a flag waving, and you understand why that's happening.
All right, that's Diane from Alaska. Next caller is Rick from Portland, Oregon on the Democratic line. Rick, good morning.
Good morning. So I'm calling as the son of somebody who worked on the National Education Association, the Michigan Education Association for over 30 years, and what I understand of the education system so far, being raised somewhat seeing on the other side of it, is that education isn't something that you get to change. You don't get to determine whether or not, well, the history doesn't exactly reflect great on us. So maybe we should teach it more patriotism. It feels like any more patriotism is being used as a brand word, where it's either like this or get out, or enjoy this or get out. You don't really owe necessarily a certain feeling towards the history of the United States, which in a lot of times is dark and bloody and gross and not very fun to deal with. So the fact that you want to, as one of the previous callers actually said, almost make it a mythology of everything's great. It seems like just like the Trump campaign with the moving goalposts, how anymore it goes back farther and farther and farther and farther to a different narrative. I mean, if we give credit to certain people, you'd still have the same people in Texas who are teaching that evolution isn't real in textbooks. At what point do we as a modern society just say, hey, that's probably not the best way to be educating our kids?
All right, Rick from Oregon sharing his thoughts there on the Democratic line. Dave from Glen Hills, Pennsylvania is our next caller on the Independent line. And Dave, there you are. Good morning.
Good morning. I had the fortune of growing up in a household. My dad was a World War II and Korean War veteran, and they used to show the national anthem on TV back in the... See, I don't hear you anymore.
You're on the air. Go ahead, Dave.
Oh, and he would stand up in our living room and put his hand on his heart when the national anthem came on TV, and I saw that example as a child, and I didn't need anybody pushing it or forcing it on me. I understand the value. Myself now, I'm a veteran, and I got asked last fall to talk to some kids on Veterans Day about what it means to be a veteran. And one of the interesting things, I went back and looked at my presentation, and I talked about Blue Star and Gold Star parents, because the Gold Star became a significant thing after one of the conventions, and the insulting of a Gold Star family and that. And I think I realized that most people at that point didn't know what Gold Star parents were, or Blue Star. And I was glad that that school district gave me the opportunity to come in on Veterans Day and share that information, not really force the kids that you absolutely have to learn it, just share what I did as a veteran, what I did serving in the military, and why that's important and why that helps us have a good way of life. I'll say two other things. The actual school system where my kids go to high school, the American Legion, the place where the presidential candidates were speaking this last week. I'm also an American Legion member, by the way. They have a program called Boys and Girls State, and the high school where my kids go won't share that information with the kids. and encourage them to go to it. You're not forcing your values, your way of looking at things. Boys and Girls State's an excellent program by the American Legion that teaches kids how our form of government's supposed to work through a week-long summer seminar at a college campus before their senior year.
All right, that's Dave from Pennsylvania. Let's hear now from Stanley in Harlem, Georgia on the Democratic line. Good morning, Stanley.
Yes, good morning. I'm specifically speaking of the African American hyphenation. I think it was because black people, black people in particular, were 3/5 of a citizen, and you couldn't vote, and you couldn't register to vote. So how could you not feel? How could you feel that you were truly a full American? So we did not address ourselves as African Americans. We were just put in that position because we were not fully Americans. We had to say we are something else, or we were put in a position to be something else. So that's how that came about. And for as patriotism is concerned, I can remember going to Vietnam and coming back, and my child couldn't even attend some of the schools. Some of the schools still segregated. So the patriotism.
All right. Stanley from Georgia. Here's a comment from Twitter. You can't teach patriotism, teach civics and real history instead, and patriotism should follow naturally. We're taking your calls and your thoughts this morning on whether or not schools should be required to teach patriotism. Next up is John from Albuquerque, New Mexico on the Republican line. John, good morning.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning. What's your thought? Yeah, we can hear you.
Well, my thought this morning, and I'm not the strongest American that there is. I haven't been able to obtain a decent job. I'd be honest with you. I drive for Uber and Lyft. Have a college degree, was on the dean's list. I can't find anybody to even interview me, let alone offer me a job with a paycheck at 53 years old. The couple interviews I've had, I get to the stage of asking for a job, and they say, well, it's straight commission. Show up and sell some solar systems, and we'll pay you when the customer pays us. Well, that's not a job. And the thing is I'm as patriotic as anybody. I was raised saying the Pledge of Allegiance every morning, stand up in school, put your hand over your heart, say the pledge, because we're all on the same team. We're all trying to reach the same end, to take care of our families, pay our bills, feed ourselves. And that's what the pledge is about. Is it just says to a child, we're all on the same team, we're all on the same page, no one can leave you out. Even though at 53 years old, I feel very, very left out. And I would be the first one to say that this is a crappy country, and it's diversified by wealth. The wealthy people get theirs, they pull the ladder up in the attic, no one else gets an opportunity. And I'm a white man, and I'm telling you this country sucks.
All right, that's John from New Mexico on the Republican line. CNN has a story outlining some facts and some history of the Pledge of Allegiance. The Pledge of Allegiance was published for the first time in September 18th, 1892, and it was published in the youth magazine, The Youth's Companion. The pledge was written to celebrate the 400th anniversary of the discovery of America. In 1954, President Dwight D. Eisenhower asked Congress to add "under God" to the pledge. And then in June 14th, 2004, the Supreme Court dismissed some challenges of the constitutionality of the Pledge of Allegiance. And then there were a number of court cases that questioned whether or not the phrase "under God" should continue to be used in the Pledge of Allegiance. Let's hear your thoughts now on whether schools should be required to teach patriotism. Christy from Charlotte, North Carolina is our next caller. She's on the independent line. Go ahead, Christy.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I don't think you can teach patriotism, but I do think that there's a problem with the history that's being taught in our schools. Our children's school books are written by liberal academia who want to distort American history. For instance, they call Christopher Columbus a murderer, genocidist. I mean, all kinds of propaganda that they put in our children's heads. They don't talk about the diseases that were brought from Europe into America that killed the American Indians. They don't talk about the reality of the Pledge of Allegiance being written by a socialist. They don't talk about the American slave owners that were black. They don't talk about reality. They talk about everything as a white man's problem. The white man holds everybody down. The rich hold everybody down, like your previous caller. So I don't think that a proper history is being taught in the schools.
Okay. That's Christy from North Carolina. Next up, Randy from Millington, Michigan on the Democratic line. Randy, go ahead.
Good morning. Thank
morning.
you for hosting this program, and I'd like to thank C-SPAN for putting it on, and all the men and women behind the scenes that we don't see that bring us this great program. It's a blessing for the nation. Teaching patriotism. I have a governor who claims to be quite a patriot, and I'm proud of him. Of course, he went out and poisoned 9,000 children with lead. That makes him a great patriot. You know, patriotism really... And I'm going to vote for Donald Trump. But I'm going to tell you right now, Mr. Trump, that patriotism line's like the old Republican love it or leave it that I'd already mentioned once before. It's ridiculous. You have to act like a human being. That would be a big start in this country, going back to treating each other like human beings.
All right, Randy from Michigan. Next caller is Eric from Marion, South Carolina on the Independent line. Eric, good morning to you.
Yes, a lot of people think that patriotism is waving the flag and showing how proud they could be an American, how proud they could be an American. But that's not real patriotism. Patriotism is being able to understand other people, just to love your country and defend your country, even though you might disagree with other people, you know, like ways in life, and you know, you might not like things they're doing, or being able to criticize your government. That's a part of patriotism, but a lot of people don't think that is a part of patriotism. When you see your government doing wrong things, you see certain segments, like for example, the police doing things, you know, certain police doing things that are not right. Being able to criticize, and it just can't just come from the group of people that's being criticized. It's also got to be from the other people that. The other people, like I would say the dominant people in society, they got to be able to also be able to, you know, even though they, you know, to be able to see wrong for what wrong is.
Eric,
that's too big.
Eric, is it possible to teach that in public schools? How would you teach that? Yeah.
I think patriotism is not. You can't teach that in school. That starts at your house. That starts at your house. Like love of country, that love of country, and being able to criticize your country when your country do wrong, and love it when they do right.
All right.
That's true patriotism.
Okay, Eric from South Carolina. Here's some information from the ACLU on students' rights on the Pledge of Allegiance. The question is, can I be made to recite the Pledge of Allegiance? The ACLU says no. The Supreme Court has ruled that just as the First Amendment protects an individual's right to say what he or she wants, it also protects his or her right not to say something. Almost 60 years ago, the court determined that compulsory flag salutes are a violation of an individual's right to free speech. So, students in public schools may refuse to participate in the Pledge of Allegiance and choose to remain quietly seated instead. Note, however, that if you decline to say the pledge, that you do not have the right to disrupt the proceedings. Next caller, Bruce from Buffalo, New York on the Republican line. Bruce, good morning.
Good morning.
What do you think?
My comment is that they should teach patriotism in the public schools. But we need to have an appreciation for the Bill of Rights that gives us our freedom. There are many countries around the world that have democracy, but yet don't have the Bill of Rights that allows them the freedom of speech, the freedom of the press, and other things. And that is my opinion.
Okay, Bruce from New York. Next caller comes from the Democratic line. Jane is calling from River Edge, New Jersey. Jane, good morning.
Yes, good morning. My thought is that patriotism cannot be taught. I believe it's simply the pride that you have in your country. However, on the other hand, I think that empathy can be taught. It's simply walking a mile in someone else's shoes. And if you ask children constantly, how would you feel if this happened to you? you'd be surprised at some of their answers. They really start thinking. And I believe the Founding Fathers were a bunch of bullies. We still have a problem with bullying in our schools, every institution going, our Congress, etc. You know, they had slaves building our country. They killed the Native Americans living here. We're taught that war is our best. It brings out the best in us. Winning wars, even starting wars, terrible.
Well,
and guess
Dana,
what?
It sounds then like you believe the curriculum and the way that we teach U.S. history should be changed.
Well, yes, I do. I think transparency is everything. The truth is everything. Women had less rights than slaves during the time of our founding. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
All right.
I mean, half of our...
All right, Jane from River Edge, New Jersey. Want to bring in a few other headlines for you now. In the Washington Post, there's a story about these new FBI documents that were released on Friday related to Hillary Clinton's private email server. The story says former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and her staffers used an informal and sometimes haphazard system for exchanging and storing sensitive information and were at times unaware of or unconcerned with State Department policy. Documents from an FBI investigation into a private email server system show. The documents reveal myriad new details about the email setups and show that investigators found multiple attempts by hackers to access Clinton's system, a series of personal devices and servers that the Democratic presidential candidate told investigators she used as a matter of convenience while she was Secretary of State. The materials, which include a summary of the FBI's entire investigation, as well as Clinton's hours-long interview with agents in July, contain no major revelations, but they offer fresh details that Clinton's political opponents will be able to use in the months leading up to the November election. Now, joining us now by phone to give us a little bit more detail about these new documents is Katie Bo Williams. She's a staff writer at The Hill newspaper. Good morning, Katie.
Good morning.
So tell us a little bit more about what was found in these documents. What is the most interesting bits of information to surface?
Well, I think probably the most striking thing out of these new documents is the number of times that Mrs. Clinton said that she could not recall the circumstances surrounding her use of the server. I mean, it's dozens of times throughout the 11 pages of the summary of her interview. She has said that she could not remember being trained by the State Department on handling or retaining classified information. She said that she did not recall receiving emails that she thought should not have been on an unclassified system, relying instead on state officials to use their best judgment when emailing her. And she also appeared not to know that a small parenthetical C marked at the top of a paragraph meant the information below was considered classified. And this is important because it's kind of the linchpin of any criminal case that the FBI was going to be able to build against her. Investigators had to be able to prove that she intended to mishandle classified information.
But Katie Bo Williams, the FBI decided not to pursue those criminal charges. Will this allow folks to sort of second guess that decision?
Well, I think it's important to remember that there's a lot of juicy little circumstantial details in these pages, but there's no real bombshells in here. We already knew from Director Comey's testimony, both on Capitol Hill and his original summary of the investigation, that she sent materials that were considered classified at the time, including documents that were marked classified, through her servers. So people are going to take out of this what they want. I mean, you have to think that Republicans are going to use this as ammunition as we kind of enter this critical post-Labor Day stretch of the election. And, you know, on the other side of things, her campaign is saying that these pages show, you know, why she shouldn't have been charged.
And have you heard from Donald Trump yet? What has his response been to this latest data dump?
So Mr. Trump has already responded. He's said that the fact that she wasn't charged sort of quote unquote defies belief. He's used the words "get away with," and so you have to see him sort of playing into the public perception that Clinton is untrustworthy. So he's going to use this, I think, at every opportunity that he has.
All right, that's Katie Bo Williams, staff writer for The Hill newspaper. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
My pleasure.
And the report is available on C-SPAN's website if you would like to read it for yourself. Again, that's the report from the FBI showing some of the documents that it recovered from Hillary Clinton's email server. Still a few more minutes to get in your phone calls and your thoughts about whether schools should be required to teach patriotism. From Gainesville, Florida, Debbie is calling on the Democratic line. Debbie, good morning.
Oh, good morning. Thank you for taking my call. And no, I don't think it should be taught. I think patriotism is something that you feel. It's kind of like respect is something you can't demand, you earn it. And it's good that we teach history, but I think it's more important to teach the present. You can't get people interested. It's like you can't force people to say processed food tastes good. People want to eat fresh food because it tastes good. Well, if you want people to be patriotic, then you have to be honest about the present. And when we continue to have a two-party system that fails us, and we have all this waste, fraud, and abuse, and we see our infrastructure crumbling and our transportation failing us, our health care system, like every other advanced country in the world, has good single-payer health care, and here we've got this failed health care system, and we're allowing corporate lobbyists to fund our presidential campaigns and our senators and represent people in Congress, and they're no longer representing us. They only represent the donors. If you teach that and you have a reform of our system and end the waste, fraud, and abuse, because we're hemorrhaging, we're allowing the people that fund our presidential and senators' campaigns to rob us blind while our country cumbered.
All right, that's Debbie from Florida. A few more callers now. William from Dixon, Tennessee is up next. William, good morning to you.
Well, good morning. Thank you.
Go ahead with your thought.
I do not think patriotism should be taught. It is almost like we are being forced to believe something that we do not experience. It's almost like mind control when you are taught this in school. What we need to teach is true history. The history that is taught in school is not the truth. It is distorted. We claim that Christopher Columbus discovered America, although some says Leif Erikson was here before he was. But neither one of them discovered America because there was people already living in this land when either one of them come here. So how can they be the ones that discovered it? What it should have been that Christopher Columbus or Leif Erikson were the first Europeans that they know of here. But there's even proof that Europeans was here long before either one of them sailed the ocean. So we need to teach the truth and not a distorted message that people have to hang on as patriotism.
All right, that was William from Tennessee. And our last caller will come from Daytona Beach, Florida. Carl is on the independent line. Carl, you have the last word.
Okay, well, good. Thank you. Good morning. Well, the only thing I wanted to say is most of the criticisms against patriotism has been criticism directed at government, directed at history, directed at the way things are taught, directed at the way the laws are currently or have been before. But really, those things can be changed. That has nothing to do with patriotism per se. You can still be patriotic and be against certain rules of law or the system in general. So I don't think it's wrong to teach patriotism when we teach things like a love of team, love of school, love of cities and things of that nature. We sort of have allegiances to smaller things. And why not a country? And when you look around the world at other countries, they're terrible. This is a great country, irrespective of whatever current events are taking place now that may not be agreeable for everyone. But this country is fantastic, and to be patriotic doesn't mean that you're acquiescing to all the injustice.
All right, so that's Carl from Daytona Beach, Florida. And that concludes our first segment this morning. Coming up next,